How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to a live episode of Tier Talk, a Q&A. I have Connie with me right now. Connie, I hope you're excited. It's an awkward time. It's in the middle of the afternoon or closer to the evening side, but it's been a busy day. My daughter was under the weather, so I had to stay home today, and I got a lot of correctional energy inside me. But by the way, guys, these live shows are sponsored by three entities. We have American Military University. So if you guys get a chance, you're looking to seek higher education, go back to school. American Military University is a great online school. Not only they support me and Tier Talk, but they also support the corrections profession. We also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit Guardian RFID for more information. And then we also have the wrap. Now, guys, if you're unfamiliar with the wrap, I do have a link of a video in the description here. It'll show you exactly what the wrap is. But controlling combative subjects quickly and in an upright position so they can breathe has never been more important. Departments such as Washington, D.O.C., L.A. County, San Diego County, and hundreds of other facilities across the U.S. trust and believe in the wrap restraint. Go to saferestraints.com for contact information and mention Tier Talk to receive instructor training at no cost. Lower liability for your facility and your personnel with the WRAP, W-R-A-P. Give the WRAP a call today, 1-800-WRAP 911. Thank you, Tyson. I'm getting messages right now. I appreciate all you do. I appreciate that, Tyson. Tyson Jones. Okay, guys, so this is going to be a live Q&A, but first we already have her on, but Connie, mind introducing yourself to our audience, tell them what you've been up to?
Sure. So, hi, everybody. I'm Connie Aline. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I am the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. This correctional journey, I think that's where we're going with this, has been a very interesting one. I started my career in 2000 on Rikers Island in New York City as a discharge planner. So I guess that's equivalent to what reentry is now. And then it kind of, I don't know, maybe after like 9 months or so, I was promoted to a supervisor, which I thought was very interesting because I was like, I'm not a leader, right? But I think that's one of those times where in hindsight, I could say you lead from wherever you are, right? And sometimes other people see things in you that you may not see in yourself. And so I guess my role as a union delegate probably pushed me into that leadership space and sort of being able to see things objectively from the manager's side of the house versus the staff side of the house, and serve as a more objective advocate, I guess. I think earning the credibility of the management team as a line staff who was trying to be as fair in the approach to supporting staff grievances was definitely a thing. And then I stayed at Rikers. I was supposed to be there for just 2 years, and I ended up being there for 10. Not what I thought was going to happen, but I started to really enjoy the work that I did as a health services manager. And shortly thereafter, I transitioned out thinking I wasn't going to work in corrections anymore. That would be the end of me in corrections, but it didn't work out that way. I ended up working with the same population just on the other side, which turned out to be much more dangerous, right? So like if anyone hasn't worked with our population in sort of an inpatient space, I think for me, there may be a way that I may have even taken for granted the way custody is always there until you are out in the community and you are in a different space with the same population and there is no officer to come save you, right? There's no officer to have your back. And I learned that at the Institute for Community Living. We were on the grounds of Creedmoor, and there I was the resident director. And it was really just the same population outside. And I said, I'm going to break away. And that didn't quite work out either, because I ended up going into domestic violence shelter. And that was still same sort of, advocacy and work just a bit tougher emotionally, mentally. And then I relocated to Connecticut. I was recruited by UConn. At the time, they held the contract for correctional managed healthcare. And so I ended up supervising the male community corrections in Hartford first. And then I ended up supervising the female prison in Niantic, which was just absolutely bonkers. Going from dealing with the male population to the female population I think I was just shell shocked for a while. But you know what? I think that's where I learned the most about corrections. I think I got the most exposure to safety, security, all the things that I think, in Rikers, we were very much, this is your role. And, you do reentry, you do discharge planning. But when you step into, so one, I think being a prison administrator makes it different, but then turning into this it's like you do everything at that point. I don't even know. I think with the women, it was everything from healthcare, medical, mental health, dental, um, reentry services, programming, security. I mean, I dealt with so many things that I'd never dealt with before. So it's definitely been an amazing journey, which all led me to the Civilian Corrections Academy.
And by the way, a very important move that you did when you did the Civilian Corrections Academy, because obviously, even at the time when it was invented, it just wasn't enough training, and you still see that now. So it's a good thing that we're able to. That's what originally connected us, by the way. The fact that you do these things for the civilians, so they can walk in with a little bit more knowledge, but more importantly, an understanding of what they're going into. I worked with females as well. I have about 8 or 9 years with the female population. I was an officer. I enjoyed my time with them. I do agree with Connie that I learned a lot more, not even just about the job itself, but about myself, what I was willing to tolerate. It's different. One thing I will tell you, working with a female population, I also think for those that also work with the juveniles as well, your communication has to be on point. I mean, you're going to spend most of your day communicating and de-escalating. And, for me, I actually enjoyed it. As you may know, I'm a talker, so when some people go, hey, Ganji, would you prefer a male jail over a female jail or a female jail over a male jail? To be honest with you, because I started at a female facility and that's kind of like the foundation, that's kind of like my roots, I don't mind it. I know after working with men now, because I do work with men, that working at a female facility could be a bit more difficult. It's more emotionally draining. But having said that, because I started there, I find that I developed a lot of skills that help me adapt to that environment, that when I go to the male facility, it works, when able to use it, but you don't get to use it as much, But what's your thoughts, Connie, on the difference of the two?
Yeah, so I do think working with the females, it can be definitely a bit more taxing. I think just because their issues are a lot more involved. Like, there's layers. I guess that's probably the easiest way for me to deal with that, get or to express that. So like with the female population, most of them have experienced some level of trauma. And so, it usually isn't so simple as a yes or no, right? Like sometimes that no triggers something, and then it's like, oh Lord, like what did we do? And, it's the dealing with the families and the kids and everything else that comes along with a female who is a provider. And then from a medical perspective, there's just so much involved with managing female health care. One of the biggest challenges I think I had as an administrator was constantly creating the business case for why we needed more resources in a female facility than we may have needed in the male facility. And I think the challenge with that is that so our upper management would like to think we're comparing apples to apples, But when you're comparing the male to female healthcare needs, it is not apples to apples. And I think, you know, being able to distinguish the difference between, you know, the healthcare needs of the females versus the males is paramount, I think, to the success of anybody running a female facility, because they're like these little nuances that from a big picture you may not be able to pick up those nuances. It's not until you get into the ground level and start digging in it that you see how challenging it is to sometimes work in the female facility.
Yeah, I know that we started seeing that with programming and vocational training. I think now you're starting to see more of an effort across the country to provide more balanced programming and definitely vocational training. I believe that there were a lot of females in prisons and jails that weren't receiving the same type of vocational training that they were the counterparts were getting, the male counterparts. So I know there's been a push to kind of bring some stuff into the facilities that's just equal for them as well, so they get a fair chance at the real world. So yeah, I definitely I know it's been a lot since a lot of changes has happened since I entered in just 2002. So we've definitely evolved and try to do what we can to balance what's being provided in both worlds. I mean, yes, there was a lot of attention on the men because at the time the men were the biggest numbers, but even when I was entering this profession in 2002, women were constantly growing. Now, believe it or not, now obviously everything shifted, especially with COVID, so numbers are decreasing. But having said at that time, I remember that the number for women were going up. They were usually in the distance, and now people are actually holding them accountable for a lot of things, like including, maybe they were the ones that were holding the stash, the drugs and stuff like that. So they started getting pulled in to the picture, and next thing our numbers increased for a little bit, but then eventually it started to drop and lessen. And now with COVID, obviously it's a lot less, but programming was a big thing. I'll tell you that. Now, guys, one of the things, and hopefully we'll get some questions soon, but if not, I think one of the things we want to discuss here is remaining motivated. So me and Will, I don't know if Connie was able to see it. So every Sunday, me and William Young, he has a channel called Just Corrections. And we try to do a live every Sunday. We've done it 2 times in a row. We're going to push again for this Sunday. And when you do a live, you never know where the questions are going to take you. But you have to kind of answer those questions. That's why they're there. So you got to take the risk. And we realized that, during the dialogue, and by the way, nothing's prepared. We just kind of go in and see where the dialogue is going to take you. So when we do these dialogues, we try to keep things balanced, but we do have 2 perspectives. Will's got that frontline perspective, and then I do have a frontline perspective as well, but also I try to bring in the administrative perspective. I think that's good for us to kind of try to balance out the dialogue. One of the things that we were discussing the other day is that, we kind of are divided, and the thing is that all we do is kind of vent in isolation. What we should do instead of just venting in isolation is kind of have these dialogues where we could sit down and discuss what these concerns are and get different perspectives, instead of just kind of venting to people that only have that same perspective. And it's great because we had the dialogue. We talked about why administration sweats the small things, things that we could be doing better. And it was funny because I said that, as much as sometimes we'll get the frontline attacking admin. Admin really, it's sad to say. Hopefully, they're not attacking back. Hopefully, we kind of get what their concerns are and do what we can to mitigate those concerns. But I have a feeling that most of the time people don't understand the different perspectives. So having a chance for someone from the administration side to kind of look down and get the meaning behind someone that is really frustrated, or maybe they don't understand what's happening, and then also getting someone from the front line to understand the efforts, the things that we're trying to accomplish. So we wind up having this great dialogue, and it kept on coming up about understaffing, the same issues that we hear over and over again, and that people aren't doing enough. So right off the bat, Connie, during these times,
What do
when
you
we
mean
do
by
this.
people? What people aren't doing enough? What do
Well,
you mean?
it was management,
Oh,
basically
okay.
management's not doing enough. And again, management is limited as well. But the funny thing is that when we do this show, guys, we try to keep people motivated and inspired, because the last thing we want to do is, be a voice that pushes people away from this profession, especially during these times. So what we kind of talk about, even on Just Corrections on this show, is what we feel the profession is or has been to me, or if it's not, where it has the potential to go if we take these steps. But the last thing we want to do is, we don't want to push people away from this profession by kind of doing a show that just kind of always focuses on the same concerns where there's no hope to fix. At the end, we don't have control of what we're dealing with right now. What we do have control is how we react to what's happening. That's why it's very good to have good, strong supervisors moving up. Supervisors that know exactly what they're getting into when they take those higher positions. Right now, it's like, well, I'm going to be a supervisor. Sure. Why? Well, because it's more pay and it's this and it's that. Guys, right now, the supervisors that have to step in right now have to deal with the pressure of the times. And the supervisors that we want motivated, that we want to take the higher positions, that we want to be motivated for the right reasons, are the ones that are ready for the challenge. And what I mean by that is, guys, right now we're trying all this effort to get people in to, try to maintain what we have. But in the end, we have very limited control of incentives to bring people in. We do have more control of how to keep people to some extent, but to invite people in, that's harder to do. So, the supervisors that we have that are coming up, we kind of need them to also be a little bit of a voice of positivity. Again, because we want to bring people in, but we don't want to bring people into a hopeless world. We want to bring people into a world that, hey guys, trust and believe that we're going to be optimistic. There is something at the other end of this, but we just have to go through it now. So moving up, Connie, right now, what would you expect from the supervisors that are directly over the front line?
So, I mean, you want them to be able to highlight specifically when people are doing a good job. You want them to be able to recognize people for their work and their efforts, and when they are going above and beyond, even though they're tired, even though they're on a double or in some cases on a triple. Like, I think those are the things that go a long way when you have a supervisor that's connected to the front line and can relate and understand what they're going through on the front line. I think when that supervisor can serve also as an advocate, and like the staff knows that like that supervisor has their back, and they're going to go to bat for them, they're going to go forward. They know that if they bring something to that supervisor is going to escalate it in order to be sort of that advocate to get some relief. And I get it, there's not going to always be the outcome that we expect to see, but I think the relationship that that supervisor builds with the front line is critical. That way, the front line isn't so much focused on how tough the job is, right? But like they are thinking about, like, it's almost like this ownership that they take to like be physically present and to also sort of be there for their brothers and sisters. Because I feel like there really isn't much other incentive that is can be given right now that would keep people as motivated, other than that person internally understanding why they're there and that internal why driving their actions.
And that's kind of what we always been trying to push. Rockland County. Good evening, Anthony. Connie. Yeah, I made it. Hello to everyone in chat. Hey, what's up, Scout? That's the thing. I think as supervisors right now, or even the higher ups, we have to look at what our vision statement is and really go into seeing how that involves everyone. And for those that are not understanding where the agency needs to be, my concern is, and me and kind of discussed this before, is you're not going to understand the missions that are being done, daily, which are the jobs that lead towards the vision. So I think what motivates us right now is what our incentive is, our internal drive to enter this profession. So, guys, here's a unique thing, and Russ asked a good question. How do you stay positive in such a decidedly negative environment? Well, it's a choice. Being positive is intentional. Being negative is intentional. It's easier to find the negative. Me and Connie and Russ, and we could do shows all day on,
all the negative stuff.
and we've done it. But at the end of the day, they become very exhausting, and all it does is it doesn't invite the people who are researching to get into this profession. See, that's what we started realizing. As this channel grows, guys, we've grown as well. I've definitely grown in a lot of my perspectives. So the thing is, we have people that are looking to get into this profession, and they're doing their research. And these are the people we want, by the way, the ones that are doing their research. And if we had a channel that was strictly negative about the profession and kind of all we did was vent and moan and all these other things, then the people that are looking to get into this profession for the right reasons would really have nothing to connect to. They wouldn't, because, here I am, I'm looking for something that has a purpose. And all I hear is, man, this profession's got this problem, that problem, this problem, that problem. I mean, it's not that we sugarcoat the problems. It's not, because we've mentioned the problems before, but it's more of, okay, we got these problems, but without struggle, there's no progress. What's the next step that we're going to take to start moving forward? So for me, I think that even though we are sort of in a negative environment, we could choose to be positive by choosing where we focus. We could focus on all these concerns that we have that are out of our control, or we can focus how we react to things that are in our control. My biggest thing right now, guys, is that I know corrections has a lot to offer that relate to both professional and personal growth. So when you're entering this profession, your chance to impact lives. Now, whether that's the inmates, whether that's your peers, the chance to be a leader, the chance to maybe have an influence on the criminal justice system. There's so many things here that can help someone define an internal why that will bring them in this profession for the right reason. So yes, we're surrounded by negativity, but while you're here, if you're intentional with trying to find some positive, I think you'll see it. But if you're going to kind of stay with the negative, then that's all you're going to see. And Connie, here's the funny thing though, and we've discussed this before, is that the people that complain constantly, and I get it, guys, I get it, that we're understaffed and all these other concerns, and I don't know why someone would want to join this profession. Well, you're going to have someone next to you who wants to join the profession, and they know kind of what they're getting into. And then we partner them with someone that's disgruntled, who's right next to them, who is saying all these negative things, pushing this person out within the first week. And then that person who pushes them out will be the first one saying, yeah, we're not doing enough to keep people. It's like, well, yeah, but what have you done? Honestly, Connie, a part of the incentive to maintain also has to deal with the peers that surround the people that are coming in. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So, I think, as we receive new people, new staff come in, I think it matters that we are adjusting our attitudes and our perspectives accordingly, because we don't want them to quit tomorrow, right? Like, we've got to be able to show them the good and the bad of the job and the ways that we're making positive impact. I think one of the things this makes me think about is, those of us who are in there, like, what is that like being the new change agent, right? That you're the new change agent. It's not that we're bringing people from outside to make the industry better, but us internally have to be the ones who are driving the change. And so what does that look like for us as we're battling all of the negativity that we're facing, right? We're also trying to manage our emotions and all those things that piss us off, and the way we're getting mandated and we're short and we don't have the resources. Like, all that stuff is there, right? But like, we have to somehow we got to take up the battle of being the ones who are going to actually push for the changes that we know we need to see, because they impact us directly. And part of that is not being the person who's going to make sure that the new guy that just came in knows how crappy this job is, right? Like, yeah, we're going to try to make sure they understand the dangers and the pitfalls and such. But what are all the other positive things that you're getting out of the job, right? And I think that's how we contribute to making that change.
Yeah, I know there'll be some people that will sit there and say, Ganji, all this effort's fruitless. I mean, really, is it? I mean, if you remember, it's a lot of effort to be intentional and look for the positive. I mean, that's really what you focus on, and how you define what it is that you're seeing. I mean, I've worked in corrections for 20 years. I've had positive moments. We can't sit there and say that we haven't, and then yes, times are extremely tough right now because there's the unpredictability. And I'm not sitting there and I'm not going to say, hey, well, you got into this profession, you knew you were getting into. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, guys, if we're in a situation that we are having trouble changing because it may be out of our control, but we're kind of in this profession, because I'm not going to say we're trapped, but we're too far in just to up and leave. I think we have to find a way to shift our focus, even for our own personal survival, for our mental health. I mean, think about it. I mean, we're going through all these things right now, and everything we're facing is out of our control. The understaffing, the changes that are happening in the system right now, that we should be a part of. And the funny thing is, guys, a lot of us has kind of pushed away from the changes that are happening. Even I, at the very beginning of all this, but I found that, you know what, guys, pushing away completely was wrong. What I should have did more, and I'm trying to kind of encourage now, is to kind of be a resource to the change. So I'm not saying I'm being controlled by the change. I'm saying I'm adding to the change, because what happened was the people that had the best influence and where the change was going, they became resistant, and they kind of moved themselves out of the picture, and then we're wondering why. Well, no one wants to listen to them. Well, every time you talk, you're just an obstacle. So the biggest thing here was, hey guys, change is going to happen regardless. So we need to find out how we fit in this, because the last thing I want is for people that are in this career for the long run to not feel that they have value in this picture. So we don't realize is that when we have people that are disgruntled, that are telling other people that, hey, by the way, corrections is changing and they don't care about the stuff we do. I disagree with that. I think there is some level of care. It's just that maybe people are getting frustrated because the strongest piece of the puzzle that could really help move this in the right direction at some point has kind of been, you know what, we're not going to help. We're going to stay back here, and just because we're so mad because things haven't been going our way. But having said that, I think there are certain people that understand where it's going. They are part of that influence and change, whether they want to be or not. They are. But the problem is, because we have people that are disgruntled, that are kind of pushing them towards this extreme, the people that want to create that impact, they don't think they can. They don't think they have permission to. They think they'll be an outcast. And all we're doing is just furthering our chance to be actively involved in where we're headed. Because in the end, guys, I mean, I've been doing this show since 2000, I don't know, 15, maybe before that, and, we still seem to be going in that one direction. I remember at one point I was adamant, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to get our voices heard and all this other stuff. And technically the show shifted to, guys, we need to work together. We need to understand the importance of our profession. I mean, I got caught up in just the negativity of it all. And after a while, it's like, man, this is frustrating. Like, I'm an angry dwarf. You know what I mean? Someone called me that. You know what I mean? I remember that. It's like, he just goes on. He's angry all the time. And I'm sitting there like, man, how horrible is that? I don't want to have a show that you're constantly angry all the time. I want a show where, by expressing some of the concerns, you still highlight some level of positivity. And it was great because once you start shifting and you start, bringing value into a community that may not see it at first, oh, it's great when you start getting the email saying, hey, Gans, you've inspired me to go into this profession. And that to me is the greatest gift, because not only is that a gift to me, because that means they're using what we put out here and they're really applying it, but I think that's a gift to the agency they go to and the person that they're walking next to. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts on that, Connie.
Well, I mean, I think it's a gift in that, while they may be coming in with some preconceived notions about what corrections is like, they've had the option or the opportunity to be exposed to a tier talk, to be exposed to keepers of chaos and just corrections. And so they're not walking in as green, as some others do. I mean, I walked in, I knew nothing about corrections, right? So, like, I saw someone just put in the comments, building confidence, when, that when they first start, they're nervous and scared. I mean, I first started, I was nervous, I was scared, right? And I had no resources to tap into to understand what I was walking into. I mean, I think the only context I had at the time might have been Oz or like The Wire. like, and I mean, now people talk about Orange is the New Black, which I've never seen, but I just feel like, ultimately, as we are stepping into these roles and new people are coming in, we do have to embrace that they're coming, and we do have to do our best, I think, to pour into them our experiences. I mean, and like the good, right? Like, and sometimes, maybe if they present with a question, because, I remember going to an officer one time and asking him about, like, I was trying to get like cleaning supplies, and I didn't really understand I thought if it was cleaning supplies, it's for everybody. And so no, it wasn't for everybody. Like, these were like for the inmate workers, these were for like DOC. And then because I worked for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, like, I needed to order my own. I was like, I just got here. I don't have nothing, right? Like, but it's like those simple things that can become a frustration, and that frustration begin to build, because on one end it's a team, and then on the other end it's that challenge of, like, how do we still function as a team in a space that can be very restrictive, right? And I think there's a frustration in that in of itself. And so we've got to be able to see, like, I mean, he turned to me and was like, hey, Connie, go in the closet and get what you need. And I was like, oh, thank God. Right? Like, because now I'm thinking, how do I order? Right? Because that's like a whole other ball of wax that, like, I just want to clean my desk. Like, why do I have to go through all of this? And that's me as a civilian, right? And I could just imagine, what are those policies, procedures, and such in place when you're running a housing unit? And if you're brand new and you don't really know all of that, I can imagine if you can't turn to your partner and ask a question, what that feels like, having to kind of start from scratch and just figure it all out. So, I mean, when I think of change agent and us really trying to find the good, I feel like we all have it in us. And sometimes it's just being able to push away the things that were points of frustration or contention for us, because we are trying to move forward. And how do we just pour into new folks all of the goodness that we do have to offer, and not become like that bitter staff person, right? Like, stay away from that one.
Yeah, like Andrew had a good question, kind of relates to exactly what you're talking about. I think another thing that's a challenge for me now is building up new officers' confidence when they first start, and some are nervous and scared at times. I want to add on this too, because obviously I've worked with rookies. I remember being a sergeant, training a few, and then also being an officer and training a few, probably when I only had a few years in myself. I think times are different now. I mean, most of the people that I would like to think that are entering this profession have more availability of what they can research about this profession. Now, again, it's still not what you're going to feel when you walk in. I get it. But it gives you sort of an idea of what it is that you're going into. And I would like to think, but right now we're hiring out of desperation, that if we did have interviews when people are coming in, that you can kind of get where they're focused by the questions that they're asking. I mean, I tend to do it when I'm looking to hire a civilian. I look for certain questions that I feel may make the person a little bit too timid. Now, the funny thing is, guys, I believe there are some things that can be developed and cultivated, but I do think that you can get a sense of one's character. That you know what, it doesn't matter what you're going to do with this person. I just feel that they're not ready. So when you're looking at the rookie, you're looking at the potential, not what's directly in front of you, but where this person could be tomorrow. So one of the things I feel that we have failed on for so long when it comes to helping the rookie build confidence is letting them know where the resources are, or when there is a concern. Because I think, like what Connie said, when you're a rookie and you're coming in and you're feeling alone in a world that you know very little about, in a layout that you don't understand, there's no way, you're going to have confidence. In my mind, if it looks like you have confidence, I'm going to say this person's arrogant. Thin line there, but it's true. It's like, you know what? You're coming into this world not knowing what you're entering into to the extent, again, there's research here, but you really don't really know until you've entered into the prison or the jail to kind of get that feeling. And for me, it was the smell. I know it's something so simple, but the smell, the feeling, there's a feeling there, right? So with that said, the best way to build confidence with the rookie staff is to kind of let the rookie staff know that you're there for them. Let them know that you're a resource. I think for me, confidence comes with knowing where to go when you have a concern. And confidence doesn't always come with having the answers. That's not always the case. I mean, experts are not really experts because they have the answers to everything. It's just experts become, I hate the word expert, but if we're, what we're saying here is experts become experts because they know how to get the answer. They know how to research. They know what to do to make sure the answer has some validity. But with that said, I think what builds a rookie's confidence is letting them know, if you call me, I'm here. One of the first things I was taught when I was a rookie is the layout of the facility. And when the person showed me the layout of the facility, they kind of introduced me to officers, and we built a little bit of a relationship to where I knew if I had something or had a concern, these are the people I can call. So I guess for me, how do you build confidence is to show the person that they're supported. Now, you also added a little caveat there where it says nervous and scared at times. I could be nervous and scared at times with 20 years in. It's just a matter of what that feeling makes me do. How do I interpret that feeling? If I interpret my nerves as, oh shit, I'm going to freeze now. I don't know what to do. And I become hesitant. Well, that becomes a problem, but again, people may be nervous and scared. Again, I could still be after 20 years. But with that said, how do I interpret that? And how does that cause me to, how does that affect my behavior when dealing with the population? And again, I think what kind of eased the nerves and eases the fear, because sometimes the fear is just the unknown, and again, in a prison or jail, there's always going to be the unknown, is to have those resources to fill in the blanks. But what's your thoughts on that, Connie?
So the nervous and scared, I feel like it's healthy, right? You stepped into an environment that you know nothing about, or you know little about, and so having some nerve and some fear of that, I think, is normal and healthy. But I do think it matters what those nerves and that fear, how it makes you react. And so one of the things that I think about is, if you walk in and you don't have the nerves or the fear, are you underestimating what you're walking into? Right. Like, I think that the nerves and the fear is kind of like your own barometer for what you may experience within your day there. So I think there's some good and bad in that, but I think it's to be expected. And if you don't have some sort of feeling either way, like, I feel like you may not be clear on what you're going to be exposed to when you start walking through the corridors or walking a housing unit. I mean, I remember walking down one of the corridors in OBCC, and I was passing like the pen, and I heard like yelling, and I remember feeling my pulse increase. And I was like, "You're sweating. Why are you sweating?" But it's almost like your gut, your body is responding to the environment, and your gut is kind of speaking to you. And so I was new, but it was still something I hadn't experienced before. And of course, I was just like, "Holy shit, like, what did I sign up for?" Right? But then I got used to it because I had to walk that corridor every day. And it was like, oh, okay, something's going down, right? And it's not like the fear, like no one's running out to come get you and you're not in imminent danger. You're not going to get hurt. So, I just think that as the newer folks sort of have more experiences in the environment, I think then you could see whether or not that fear and those nerves are like a barometer, or this is just not the right environment for them.
Yeah, and guys, I like what Connie said too. I mean, you kind of just you got to go through it. I mean that's it. And the more times you go through it, the more you start to feel more confident in yourself going through it the next time. I mean, it's not that it becomes so routine. You put your hands in your pocket and you're walking around all calm. It's just you have to first make the
What's wrong with my
initiative.
hands in my pocket?
We don't do that. Not in corrections. What are you doing? So the point is, you have to make the initiative, and then my biggest concern is when you feel that someone isn't going to make the initiative. Now, I believe that if you had these interviews face to face, I believe that's something. If you have someone trained there to kind of know what to see, I think you can see that in somebody. Like, don't get me wrong. I know I've worked with people that, again, they were scared, but they still made the initiative. They still did what was expected of them. But then there are some that they're going to be overwhelmed by that fear, and they're never going to make the initiative. And even if you don't catch it on the interview, you're going to catch it on their first day when you watch them interacting with the inmates. Like, I do expect some level of hesitancy your first day, your first few days. I get it, but I do expect some balance of control. I do. And I do expect to see something in the middle. But after a couple of days, you start to see the effort of control being pushed out more, and then the person becoming less timid. You know what I mean? You start to see that. But when you have someone coming in that first day, and they want to follow someone down a tier constantly. Like, I mean, one of the things I always remember was when I was a rookie was I never felt alone, but when I did my tours, an officer was always in the distance watching me. But one of the things he said is, you got to do the tours on your own. Don't get accustomed to people always walking around with you, because inmates will see that as a sign of weakness. Like, every time you're going down and go do a tour, well, let me go wait for my partner. You know what I mean? I mean, again, it depends on what area you're touring. I mean, sometimes
Could it also be a distraction?
Yeah, it could be like so. It depends. I mean, some areas, don't get me wrong. I mean, it may require two people to work in a dorm. I get it, but there could be some areas where you walk in a tier where the inmates are locked down, and you're walking by, and it's like, well, I'm going to walk here, but let me just wait for the GA to come down. Let me wait and see if my partner wants to take a walk with me, and eventually the inmates start to see that. How come every time you walk, you're always with somebody? And they start to see that could be a level of weakness. So maybe later on, if they go to employ a tactic, they can employ a tactic that maybe intimidates the person, because again, it's constantly, you see that person constantly in need of having to be connected to somebody as they walk down the tiers. Now, don't get me wrong, guys, we are supposed to have each other's back. I'm not denying that. Obviously, if you're in a dorm, but at some point, you are going to have those interactions, and the interactions literally have to show that you're in control. That it's you that's in control, not the supervisor, not your partner. I mean, I used to hate individuals that when you had to give an order and the inmate questioned the order, be like, well, the sergeant told me to do it, or my partner working today, that's what they expect. It's like, well, that to me is a big no-no. That's when you go back as a supervisor, you say, hey, why are all the inmates coming up to me over an order I gave you? Well, what were you telling them? Well, I said what I gave the order that the sergeant wanted. Well, that's not how this works here. You were given an order for you to believe in and go ahead and delegate that order out. Not for you to go back and delegate it out and then have a sign of weakness where you give everything back to me. Now, when I come into the unit, I'm being overwhelmed all by these inmates, when to me that means that you took no onus or responsibility of one of the perception of authority that you've been given. If I give you an order to carry out, and you're my front line, and you go to delegate that order, and you're pushing the reason for the order towards the supervisor, I think that's a sign of weakness. And I'm talking about a real valid order. I think that's a sign of weakness in my mind. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts on that, Connie.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be in any space where you're supposed to have or be that level of authority, and you're giving away that authority, right? Like, because when you don't take ownership of the directive, however it comes down, right, it certainly does make it seem as though you almost don't agree with the directive, right? Like you're not in alignment with the directive, because otherwise you would take ownership of it. And it's okay, like, because if you stand firm in that directive, there's no need to give the power of that directive to someone else. You want someone to comply because you've told them to, not because you're now deferring that authority as well as the ownership of the directive to someone else.
And I know that's done a lot, guys. I mean, as a supervisor, there may be certain things that have to get out to the inmate population. So, like, let's say I'm a supervisor and I walk in a dorm and I just see things aren't where they should be, right? Maybe a couple of minor rule violations, but just maybe the dorm's not as clean as it should be. Pictures hung up everywhere, whatever it is. So now, what I could do is I could address the inmates, but technically what I would do honestly is call the officers and say, hey guys, listen, this is not how you run a unit. This is what I expect when I walk in. And with that said, I expect those orders to be carried out. So when I come back later on, I expect the unit to be a little bit more clean, than what it is, and again, just those little policy violations. Maybe there's something that you want to, make sure it gets done. So then what happens is when the supervisor leaves, you're hoping that the officers take control of that directive, take control of the housing unit, and then go back and deliver those directives as if it was their own. This is what I expect, guys, and what it is. And, because at the end of the day is you get the weaker officer that may go back and say, hey, guys, I know you want to have 10 pictures up, but I just spoke to the sergeant, and the sergeant says that the rules are only 2. So at this time, I need you to go back and put at 2. Look how weak that was.
Mm-hmm.
That it's weak. I mean, I picked a small thing. Forgive me, because I'm not looking to sweat small things. I get it, but just to carry my story was the fact that the supervisor gave an ethical directive to the officers, who now it's their responsibility to carry that out with authority, take onus of that level of responsibility, and give those directives as if they're your own. Because at the end of the day, here's the funny thing: if I'm the supervisor and I see these things and I go back and I tell you, hey, make this happen, and then you go back and tell the inmate, hey, by the way, the only reason why we're doing this right now is because Ganji said so, then I could have gave the inmate the damn directive. Hey, give me the keys and I'll run the damn unit. Because at the end of the day is I'm giving you the order to kind of help you get responsibility of what it is that needs to be done, but also to have that perception of authority. I mean, I don't want you guys to get walked on either. So sometimes when you see us that we want to give a directive out to you guys so you can have that directive carried out, that's to bring that perception of authority back into where it has to be, not for you to all of a sudden I give it to you and then you give it back to me. I gave it to you. It's yours. Go carry it out. And then when it's done, inmates will know this is what you start to expect. Because the sad thing is that I'm not going to be there tomorrow and the unit is going to be a mess. But they don't care because I'm not there. If you would have stayed consistent and said that this was my order, why are we doing this, Ganji? Why are we doing this, CO? Because I want it done. Well, then tomorrow it will still be done. If that makes any sense, Connie. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I think it also leaves a pretty bad taste in any manager's mouth, right? That you gave a directive and then you come back only for either one, it to not have been followed through on, or that the ownership, you didn't take full responsibility for the directive. Like, I think that's just really it. I think it says a lot about either one, your effectiveness as a staff person, whether it's an officer or a civilian who's been given a directive and they're expected to follow through on it. I mean, I think it also speaks to, I don't want to say your level of commitment, but like your level of belief in the directive, right? Because if it's something you believe in, if it's a directive you believe in, you're going to make sure it's taken care of, right? Like some people take pride in a really clean unit. Although it's an expectation, right? This is something I take pride in. So I do my best to make sure that everything in here is in tip-top shape. And some people may even take an offense to someone who came from outside and had to tell them that this needed to be taken care of. Like, so sometimes I think we may not necessarily see the urgency or understand the importance of some of the directives, but I feel like those are those moments where you ask for clarification if you're not sure. That way you can take ownership.
Yeah, I mean, again, we spoke of these directives very general, but it was really to get the idea across that, because again, I don't know if I would sweat pictures. I kind of realized that as I said it. But with that said, it wasn't about what I was looking at. I was about to let you know that you're given a perception of authority, and once that's given to you, what you do with it is literally the most important thing you'll ever do in your career. It really is. I love what Connie's saying too, the belief in it all. Like, deep down inside, if I came in and I was a supervisor and I saw your unit and not looking so good, and I call you in and we're having that discussion, if I was to actually, as a supervisor, to really help you put this together where the inmates can see me helping you put it together, I don't think that's a good look. Don't get me wrong. We could be behind the scene professional about it and say, hey guys, this is what we got going on. This is what has to be done. But it's not really for me to have that interaction because technically I'm in charge of the people who's in charge of the inmates. So it's, for one thing, it's easy for the supervisor to filter that, down to you, and then you carry the mission out. But it is for you to carry the mission out because you need to be seen as credible. And then again, the cool thing about it is if you're the one giving the directives and you take onus of these directives, like Connie said, you believe in it because you know it has to be done, then the likelihood of you having to give that order again won't happen.
Yeah.
Because you already set the standard. Someone mentioned something to me the other day. They were at a training, because now we're talking about supervisors and kind of keep the dialogue wherever it is. I think this is great. So when they go to promote someone to become a supervisor, there's an interview. Now, a lot of states have done away with the interviews. They pretty much go off a list, like whatever you score, and then especially the civil service, wherever your number is. I know some are starting to go back to interviews. I mean, there are certain positions that are still appointed where, your scoring is going to come from an interview process. Where some are just a civil service exam. But with that said, one of the things I found out recently was, I forget what state does this or what facility does this, but when someone's looking to be promoted as a supervisor and they're eligible, when they go up to be interviewed or whatever it is, they have to present a training or like a PowerPoint, whatever it is, of a policy or procedure that they're familiar with. To kind of let them see, I guess, the potential, but to also let them, see how you're going to make sure this gets carried out. So they have to do a presentation. That's what I meant. A presentation on a policy or procedure. And it could even be inventive. You could also do a presentation where you feel that something has to change about this policy and procedure. Because the one person that was telling me about this says, Ganji, because of these presentations, you should see how much of our policies and procedures have evolved. So when you get a person that's getting promoted, after they present whatever the interview, whatever it is, they have to present a presentation on maybe how to run a housing unit or whatever it is in accordance to policy and procedure. But then they also can be inventive where, if things aren't working, they can create or modify. I mean, what's your thoughts? I think
that's really cool. I'm like, that's progressive. I mean, when you think about, the person who's working close to a policy, or like they actually use that policy often, like they know the nuances and the loopholes, and the fact that they can present that at a high level and, someone take notice of that. Like, I think that's awesome. I personally, I'm like, that's where innovation is born, right? When you get those people who use those policies all the time and they can see how it's not working, or they can see how it's being weaponized, right? It's like, whoa, this is great, because then the conversation becomes constructive, right? It's not like, oh, this policy just doesn't work. It is, here's the policy, here's all the nuances with the policy, which shows that you took the time to break down the policy to see how it translates in the unit or in the facility. And then you went a step further and provided us with a solution. So like, I think that's great.
And think about the education on the other side, because the people that are doing the interviews may not be, may not have the knowledge that frontline has. I mean, that's some cases.
Yeah.
So, I mean, think how much the people that are doing the interviews now are growing, because again, we may be familiar with policy, but we may be familiar with policy from a distance. Policy from a distance is a lot different than policy, right in front of you, immediate access. So, it's great to see where that evolution is because, again, policy evolves really from the people that, are doing it every day that have to make, hey, this is not working and out of survival. We got to try it this way. Next thing you know, it's like, wow, why didn't we think of that? That's what I'm saying. That I believe that from a distance, you create the generalized policies, but then when you pass it down to the front line, the ones that have to immediately respond to those directives of the policy, that's where you find the magic, So I think it's great when now you have a person that, is looking to promote who's going to be at this table presenting that level. Because
that's a great opportunity, though.
It is. And mind you, guys, the cool thing is it starts when you're an officer or whatever department, but an officer to the first rank. And then maybe there's higher level policies. Because don't forget, guys, as you start to move up, you see more things. You see a bigger picture. So maybe as an officer, let's say I was a unit officer. So there's one policy on the unit has always been bothering me. So when I get a chance to move up, I'm going to prepare a presentation on running a housing unit. And, I'm going to adapt the policies and procedures to what it is that I want to create. But then let's say as a sergeant, I'm looking to become a lieutenant. And maybe as a lieutenant, maybe as a sergeant, maybe the manpower, the responsibility of manpower, the policies behind that, maybe I have concerns with that. So now you start to bring it up a notch, so every level has a chance to evolve. Every level has a chance to evolve. And the cool thing is that when you're being interviewed, you're presenting it to people that have the ability, hopefully, because I believe that this was put in place. I mean, you don't just come up with this idea, because I think it's a genius idea. You don't just come up with this idea unless you're feeling out there's some way that at the highest level, you can utilize that downwards. So I would like to think that there's insight there that's being developed and then helping just whatever facilities are, I would guarantee you, if they're not ahead in their practices and procedure, then no other facility will. But I would love to recommend that on the highest of levels.
Yeah. And John V's comment is really a good one, just because I think we've seen the disservice that nepotism does to the industry, aside from, disenfranchising folks who probably should have gotten the promotional opportunity. I feel like nepotism doesn't put the best candidate in the role. And in these instances where people are being overlooked and it's who I think that is definitely something that plagues this industry. And it's certainly something that, if there's something that we could do about it, that we should be paying closer attention to those instances where the best candidate is not being selected, but the candidate that knew somebody did.
Yeah, I think the danger with that is eventually the people that do have those connections, you find out how weak they are in the toughest of times. And it's a very risky move when you are operating that way. When you're operating on, well, I know this person. Well, are they best for the position? I know this person.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, because the problem is that you really can't find out the character of somebody or their ability to do the job unless they've been tested. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you're going to get the right answer. What it means is did this person step up? What did this person do? Was the intent where it needed to be? Sometimes the outcome is the outcome. I get it. But I want to know, what was the person's intent? That's all. Even when I look at reports, one of the things that I always ask the person if I'm reviewing a report is, what was your intent? Let me get that first, because that's going to paint a picture for me when I read what it is that you've done from A, B, C, D, and E, whatever it is. But if I don't know what your intent is and I'm reading it just to read it, I really have no way of guiding where I need to be, because I haven't really understood your perspective. So I think
it gives you context.
Yeah, right. So what Connie was reading before with John V, when you have people that are kind of just connected and they just kind of move up. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of them tend to be heavily supported, that they could fail multiple times and never be held accountable, where we don't have those connections and we could fail once and get the book thrown at us. Unfortunately.
And that's what fuels frustration. That's what fuels anger. That's what get people all worked up, and they do start to feel this bitterness because they sit and witness that kind of thing happening with there being no level of accountability.
Right. Now, the scary part of that, though, is that the front line sees that this person isn't credible because they're not competent, can't be trusted at that high level. But the sad thing is that the agency right now is protecting that individual. I mean, to the point where you really are not letting yourself see what this person is capable of doing, or what they can't do, more importantly. So having said that, for me, I would like to think that those that are connected. What's funny, because so it sucks when you're partnered with someone who is connected. It sucks to work under someone who is connected, because again, there could be a point where you're right below someone who's at Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law is they're at their limit right now. So now here I am trying to be as effective as I can be, and you just promoted Murphy. You know what I mean? And now Murphy is messing me up. So now here's the other thing. When you put that person at that highest level because they're connected, everybody else underneath is going to be affected by that. So now the problem is that now you have no growth, you see no potential, and the sad thing is there's probably some stars down there.
Yeah, but now there's no incentive. There's no incentive.
You're putting the lid on it. Yeah. And the sad thing is these people that could wind up being great, oh my God, you put one, you know what, this could be a topic in itself. And I thank John for bringing it up. And Connie for, exploring it a little bit. Because think about this, guys. This is why you really have to watch who you put in the initial position of leadership, or the initial position of being a supervisor. Because if you don't watch out, you could start putting lids up at each level. So eventually it starts, the higher that person goes, you could have a whole facility affected. A whole facility affected because you put the wrong person in that higher position, and then you have the people with the greatest potential beneath them that, what can they do? They're trapped. They can't be effective. They get disenfranchised. And most of the time, bad leadership forces good people out. Right, Connie?
Yep. I was about to say, and then they leave. And then here we are starting from scratch when we've just lost a great person or great people, because they say, right, like people don't leave jobs, they leave bad managers, right? And I think when we aren't mindful of who we're putting in these positions, and just to think, as a leader, you're in a role of influence, right? And if you really didn't want the leadership job, but you just wanted the money, like what kind of leading are you doing, right? If you really didn't want this job, but you wanted the title, or you wanted the power associated with the title, like I think we have to really be mindful that, as you said, like as you start to promote, right, like that's that person's first step. And then it's the next, like those promotions are only going up. And then what happens is you get all these people who are trying to do their best. They're putting their best foot forward. But when you've got a crappy manager who can't acknowledge people, who aren't developing people, who are intimidated by those people who are working hard and making things happen, like you start to see, like we start losing people. And I like that you do start looking over at people and they're now disgruntled.
Yeah, even with big businesses, when they start to kind of go through a culture shift or shift, like a bot, whatever it is, they replace all management, because they said the facility wouldn't be this way if you had good leaders up at top. So that's usually the universal precaution. Morale.
Reorganization. We're gonna reorg.
We're gonna reorganize.
That's it.
And to be honest with you guys, part of the discussions that we've had right now, I mean, we've done a lot of speaking events, and it's great how, we've crossed into like inmate manipulation, to speaking at leadership conferences, being called back, because you think it's common sense, but it's not if it's the norm. So, so that's the scary thing. It's kind of like depression. And I'll explain that because I kind of went, whoa, to the extreme on that one. But let me explain that. People get
I'm
depressed.
like, we're going dark right now.
Yeah, but I know I can relate this though, because I saw a word in my head, depression. I'm going to see how I can relate it right now. So here we go. I'm going to try this out. So depression is a state that eventually becomes permanent and it becomes a norm. You know what it means? It's like, I don't even know there's a way out of it right now because this is how my life is going to be, until someone makes the effort to try to change your state, to try to understand how you see the world and change the meanings that you have behind certain things and how you see it. Same thing here. I think that when you have leadership that is poor, and it continues to be this way for years and years and years, it becomes an accepted norm to the point where no one else is even looking to the left and right anymore. They just think that this is how it is and this is how it always will be. And then all of a sudden you come in with something like, something so simple. Maybe like, hey, I read a leadership book, and by the way, leadership isn't about position, it's about the people. Oh my God, we've never heard that before. It's like, whoa.
Or you get the other, which is, let's put his light out.
Yeah.
We don't need that person coming in here trying to change things, right? So we got to be careful.
Yeah, so when you go in there, sometimes I love what you're saying, because sometimes you need someone from the outside. To be honest with you, I never thought, like when it came to leadership and all this other stuff, to me, it was always common sense. I believe I've carried these characteristics with me my whole career, even as an officer dealing with the population, to sergeant, to administration. But then you work next to certain people and it's like, man, it's not so common sense. But then this person here that really isn't the best is not the one that's going to watch videos like this, or is not the one that's going to read books, or they don't educate themselves. So they
don't think they need it.
Yeah, they need it. So the ones that need the books to better themselves, they don't read them. And then even if you're like, well, listen, I'm going to send them over for this leadership training, they're not going to listen. They're going to be, because think about it, guys, you've been doing it this way for so long, or they've been doing it this way for so long. They're not going to waken up. In my opinion, they're not. It takes the front line to literally have that collective voice to go ahead and say, hey, this isn't working. This is what has to be done. But it's not going to be to their immediate supervisor. It's going to have to come downwards. They're going to have to go up a level and bring it back down. Because I've worked with some leaders or some supervisors where they were just there to supervise. They were there to pretty much, cover their own ass, punitive all the way. And at the end, it's like, yo, this guy is really killing morale. There's no trust anymore. We're not learning anything. We're becoming hesitant. We're becoming afraid. So that what happens is your work starts to get affected. You're not going above. You're not going above and beyond. You're only doing what's expected of you, and that's it. So then eventually,
what's too long.
Yeah. So
you identify that, and how long does it take for us to take action on the person who's killing morale?
Well, see, now to me, when it comes to that, it usually is for me. First off, a lot of us get disgruntled or we get disenfranchised, right? Mm-hmm. But there has to be someone that says, yo, I got the potential to do a lot more than what I'm doing. So usually it's the person that, maybe is looking at tomorrow. Like, I can't do this forever, So I got the potential to grow. You put me under someone who's just stopping me from being effective. I can't, do my gang stuff anymore, or I can't do those extra searches. I mean, this guy just doesn't want the added work, because obviously if I'm doing extra searches and I find stuff, I got to give it to that supervisor, but they don't want to work. Or I'm doing gang interviews, whatever I find, got to go to that supervisor, but they don't want to work. So eventually you'll find that it's the go-getters, the people that are highly motivated, that are looking for an excuse to see this as a career, and they usually go above and say, listen, these are things that I want to get done, blah, 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 but he's stopping me from doing it. And for those that are disgruntled and disenfranchised, some of them choose to stay in that state. But again, I would disagree. because in the end, you can choose at that point to try to make a difference, to go the next level up. And if that doesn't work, to go the next and document. I know issues right now, Connie, where I've done shows where, Ganji, what do you do when you're working with a lazy supervisor? And at the end you could, and what it is they've tried every option, and it's like, well, I've done that. I said, all you can do is document at that point. But all you can do is keep documenting, hold people accountable. But in the end, you can't stop. You have to be
that's
annoyed.
Where the frustration comes in, right? Right. Like, I feel like that's the thing that we got to be mindful of, is that, people are documenting, they are trying to, escalate, they're trying to go up the chain of command. And then, just how frustrating it becomes when they're doing everything and they're not seeing any efforts, or maybe they feel that there aren't any efforts. And I get it. Sometimes with most disciplinary actions, right, or when you bring something forward, most folks won't hear about it, right? Like, that's just the nature of discipline. That's the nature of, you can bring a complaint forward, but as a manager receiving that complaint, there's a strategic way to manage that complaint and still try to address the issue without, one, the person being put on blast, or even putting the person on blast who brought the issue forward. But I could see how it gets frustrating when we say this person is killing morale. We do the documentation, we document, but maybe that person is related to somebody who's connected, right? It's like that banging your head against the wall because it's just not going anywhere.
Right, but I agree. But the only end result that is if you become disenfranchised, then it's going to start becoming the norm. So right. I'll give you an example. When you work in an understaffed facility, you get the rookie, maybe the first person comes out, well, this is supposed to be 2 officers on this post, there's only 1, and they document it the first day. But then the second day, it's the same thing, or the third day. And by the 4th or 5th day, they stop documenting it because they've accepted that as the norm. So I'm trying to tell people here, when you have those concerns, never accept it as the norm.
Right.
If you have to document, do it again, but it's not going where it doesn't matter. Because here's the key right now, is the key is so you don't accept it as the norm. So if anything, now you're doing it to remind yourself that you're that go-getter. Because, the moment you don't document that concern, the moment you start to internalize it, and then you start being that disgruntled, disenfranchised employee. Again, so sometimes it's not about the outcome, but the effort behind it. Trust and believe, guys, the effort behind that is more of a reminder to let you know you have greater potential, especially when you're working with those weaker leaders. Because if you start to accept it as the norm, then you start to actually see less in what it is that you're able to do. One last question before we come down to a close, and then maybe we'll do another live feed with Russ, maybe tomorrow night, Wednesday night, or whatever it is. If you guys are interested, let me know. Do you guys feel that inmates that have been down for a while be offered methadone? We'll answer this for John. So we want to go first? I have an answer to this, but you want to go first on this one, Connie?
Oh, I don't mind. I mean, so, they say methadone is supposed to be effective at curbing the craving for the opioids. It's supposed to help us to better manage behaviors or at-risk behaviors. There's been some research to show that it's decreased incidents in facilities because inmates aren't as riled up or worked up or what have you. I mean, I think that the research is still out there, right? And, if an inmate isn't going to be going home anytime soon, I've been in a space where we would maintain them until the inmate has officially been sentenced. And then we would titrate the dosage down so that we can ultimately get the inmate off. I do know that the methadone maintenance, Suboxone maintenance, like I know that the protocols have been evolved over time, but it's not supposed to just be the medication. It's supposed to be medication, psychotherapy. It's supposed to be a combination of things that the inmate is sort of participating in order to maintain that methadone maintenance status. But the goal ultimately is supposed to be able to titrate that inmate down. If in fact the inmate has a date they're going to be going home, it was the practice I'm aware of that we maintain them on that methadone until they go out into the community and then transition that maintenance to the community. So should they continue to be offered the methadone, I do believe that there is a point of no return. There's a point where they should be weaned off, and we don't want them going through the withdrawal symptoms and such. So definitely under that clinical or that therapeutic care, that I would see it to be appropriate, because they're not going to be back in the community to end up, using opioids again. But I guess the other argument that I've seen is that, inmates have found way to gain access to opioids in the black market in prison and in jails. And so I think from a safety precaution perspective, some folks believe that the therapeutic process or the clinical approach should be maintaining them. So I think that's a debate that continues to go on.
Yeah, I think that's what the concerns are. So one thing that we know for sure is that when they're put on, there should be an end game. Inmates have to know right off the bat this isn't something that's permanent. I think the problem is when there's no end game, it's like that short-term decision, long-term consequence. The inmates have to know that, okay, you're on this, but this is the time frame. You're not going to have this forever. So mind you, if you think you're going to have this forever, I mean, how you're not preparing your mind for the moment you don't. So I think there should be an end result, and that you work your way through it, and then eventually it's done. I don't think that's happening right now. I think that the greatest concerns are if you have someone that falls back, the concerns of them withdrawing, like Connie said. And unfortunately, I wish we could say, like, definitely in a jail, I get it. In the prison, I was used to say, I don't get it because, they've been in prison for so long. But unfortunately, like Connie said, could I honestly say that there are prisons where no drugs have the availability in a facility? No, I can't. People get compromised. There's so many ways. I mean, as much as we put these things to make obstacles, inmates find a way to get around it. So because I can't put 100% in that environment, the bigger liability is going to be if I have an inmate that's, possibly going through withdrawal. Well, he's been locked up for 20 years, but can I truly say that they have never took drugs in the 20 years that they've been locked up? No. I mean, you get inmates that are testing for K2, K3. I mean, you don't know. So if Suboxone lessens that motivation, then, it is what it is. But I still feel there's a time frame to that, that you're not just doing it just to do it and you keep the person on that same amount. You got to weed them out. So eventually, even if they don't get released, it's like, what, but you've been doing this for 6 months already. And at this point, you should be weeded out. It's like funny. It's like Suboxone is kind of being used as a replacement drug, as opposed to what it should be used, which is something to get somebody off, like a patch or something like that. I don't see it. And then sometimes it's more easier to get drugs in prison than, yes, that's why it's hard to make that promise, to say, but again, I think what me and Connie are saying is the same exact thing. Even if you do give it to someone who's been locked up for 20 years, there should be a timeline. And that inmate should be aware that, hey, within a matter of months, this is what we're doing. This is your program. And if we don't see you improving or whatever it is, we're going to try these other things. But you got to make the effort to improve, because this isn't going to be forever. It's not going to be forever. Hey, Connie, I'd like to say anything in closing? And guys, we may do a live tomorrow night around 9 Eastern Standard Time. I'll talk to Russ, see if we can do it, just to give you the heads up. Hey, Connie, what's your thoughts, Connie?
Listen, I enjoy doing the lives. I mean, we never know where the dialogue is going to go. I was reading through some of the chats. I really do enjoy these, and just these random questions, random topics. I mean, we didn't even know what we were going to talk about, right? And, just diving in, I think it just speaks to just the experience, I think, that we bring, and our willingness to even just explore the topic, right? Just to see where is it going to go. If it's something I'm not familiar with or you're not familiar with, like, we just start talking about it and we figure it out. And so I appreciate, these lives that kind of keep us on our toes.
Yeah, guys, the questions that that's a great position, not personalities. The questions that come our way is what motivates the dialogue. So hopefully we'll go tomorrow night. We'll have some good discussion, cover whatever questions you guys have, and then just, you know, prepare for the next one. That's how we do it, you know. And then I think from this, me and Connie have some ideas of another topic, I think, when it comes to leadership that we could discuss. But with that said, I hope you guys stay safe. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, like, engage, you know, comment, because I've been stuck at 18,107 subscribers. I would like to get to 20,000, but YouTube doesn't promote us as much. I'm not monetized. I do this all. And it was funny. Recently, I do know someone in the family who got arrested. And as they were going through the jail, they heard my voice in the background. They were watching Tear Talk. Yeah. The officers that, he didn't say he knew me or nothing like that, which is, you know, I don't know if that would help. Because if they didn't like the training they received, I guess it would have helped me decide if they liked the training. Where did they put you up there in solitary? Oh, what video was it? Yeah. You know, what video were they watching? Huh?
Oh
you know,
God.
or, oh, they gave me the best food. Oh, must have been the video on manipulation or something. Or Connie was on. Yeah, Connie may have been on that one. All right, guys, as always, guys, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.